Okay, hi. I am Dr. Eunice. I really wanted to us to discuss this concept called circular causality. The concept of circular causality is usually used in the context of marriage and family therapy. And this concept was developed by Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson was an anthropologist, socioscientist, and cybernetician. So his work on systems theory and cybernetics greatly has influenced the field of family therapy. So his ideas laid the foundation for understanding circular causality within family systems. So I have my whiteboard and I have my, um, obviously, what you're looking at is the hula hoop that I use, bought that on Amazon. Not advertising it, but I used it to give me a circular image. So that's what I'm going to use to explain. This is not a real case. Mr. and Mrs. Smith do not exist. They're not my clients. I don't know them. I just came up with their names, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. We're going to look at how circular causality works in this case scenario of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith has recently been diagnosed with cancer. So naturally, she's going to start feeling this mixed emotions of sadness, anger. She is fearful. So you can name all the emotions that you can think of when somebody has gotten the diagnosis from the doctor that they are going to they have cancer. So on the other hand, as you can see, as the arrow goes from Mrs. Smith to Mr. Smith, so Mr. Smith is a man, of course. He is going to be experiencing his own emotions. He is going to feel the same fear, the same anger. But because he's a spouse, he's probably going to be afraid of expressing that openly to his spouse who is ailing. And he's going to do better than that. So he thinks that he needs to be strong, the strong anchor. Mr. Smith is going to just stay strong. He's not going to show that he's worried, but he's going to just be like the positivity side of things. So he doesn't want to overburden his Mrs. Smith's feelings by saying, I'm also fearful. And so he is going to not express those feelings, even though he feels sad, even though he's fearful. So here is where circular causality comes into play. Mrs. Smith, in her own emotional state of sadness, of fear, anger, she is going to interpret Mr. Smith's lack of expression as lack of empathy. She might think, oh, he doesn't care how I feel. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care if I die. So this interpretation is going to lead to tension between the couple. So there's going to be conflict. They will start blaming each other. What happens, how that goes. So this argument is obviously going to leave Mrs. Smith more sad, more fearful, and even more angry. So while Mrs. Smith is going to see, okay, I'm trying to be supportive here. I am trying to just be strong for you. There's nothing I can do better. You're going to criticize it anyway. So he is going to withdraw emotionally. Mr. Smith emotionally withdraws even further and further. So you see how the cycle perpetuates itself. As you go round the clock or round the circle, Mrs. Smith's interpretation of Mr. Smith's behavior is going to influence her reactions, with then affect which then is going to affect Mr. Smith's behavior, and so on and so on. So it creates this loop where each person's actions and interpretations feed into each other's, creating this ongoing pattern of interaction and conflict. So what happens in therapy is that, as a therapist, you would like to work with Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith to help them recognize this cycle and understand how their behavior and interpretations are connected. Of course, exploring alternative ways for them to communicate and express how they feel about the cancer diagnosis, so that you can break this cycle or the circular causality, and obviously help them deal with diagnosis in a more positive way, in more supportive way, where everybody feels like their feelings are being respected. So I wanted to express that. So this is Gregory Bateson's concept of circular causality, just in case you find it somewhere in your exam, especially for those who are studying MFT. Please give me feedback. Did you like it? Was it helpful? Subscribe to my channel. You can like, you can comment. Let me know your feedback so that I can continue doing much more of this. Thank you for listening.